The question is, what does atheism have to offer? Atheism has no explanatory force whatsoever. Atheism is a negation. Atheism has no ontological status. Atheism cannot describe or explain morality, rationality, consciousness. Atheism brings nothing to the table. With that, I conclude with Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wow. Okay, so that was very well done.
Atheism responds to a single proposition. Does God exist? Atheists believe not. Atheism is not a political ideology or a complete way of life like Islam. Atheism offers liberation from dogma and superstition. Secular societies are evidently better than Islamic theocratic dictatorships. Atheism liberates from the regressive and oppressive Islamic world order. Atheists without religious dogma utilize reason, evidence, moral philosophy, and moral intuition to become better people and produce better societies. Elevates the human condition with philosophy and science over superstition and ritualism. As a response to theocracies, secularism creates freer and better societies. Islam, on the other hand, harms human well-being by replacing true wisdom with superstition, moral character with Islamic ritualism and Sharia. If Islam dominates this world, we leave behind the age of reason and we enter the age of superstition, or humanity goes back in the medieval ages. It's that simple.
Atheism brings nothing to the table. With that, I conclude with Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wow. Okay, so that was very well done, especially just being 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, not only did he present the 4 arguments for Islam, which is the preservation of the Quran, the fact that no one can imitate it, the lack of contradiction, and fourth, the prophecies that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, made. He spoke about the miraculous nature of Islam existing itself, the fact that it was able to conquer these amazing empires and do so with a lack of resources, and also that them conquering these empires was foretold by the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, in a prophecy.
Mohammed Hijab has prepared the best evidence for Islam he could come up with for this debate. And this is how pathetic they are. First, the prophecy. The prophecy was described in an Imam Bukhari hadith in the 9th century. That is 195 years after Persia was fully conquered. The Islamic Empire was at its golden age and already attempted to conquer Constantinople and failed. Then, after 600 years, Muslims will eventually conquer Constantinople. But that is 800 years after the supposed prophecy of Muhammad, even if we trust that the hadith is reliable history, which is not. We cannot trust hadith. Even Yasser Qadi said that we cannot trust hadith as reliable history. But let's say we trust hadith as reliable history. So Muhammad had 1,000 years to be wrong or right about a prophecy. But it's even worse than that. See now how Mohammed Hijab misrepresented this prophecy.
And the Prophet of Islam made predictions that were so frequent and so precise that no other figure in human history made them. For example, he told us that the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire would both fall to the Muslims. Now, according to Barnaby Rogerson, who is a historian, non-Muslim historian, he said that the similitude of the Arabs at that time taking over the Persian and Roman Empire is the same as Eskimos taking over Russia and America. Imagine what kind of a wild prediction this is.
Hadith is not reliable history, therefore this prediction cannot be assigned to Muhammad. So the earliest this prophecy can be accounted for is the Hadith source. The earliest Hadith source made is in Musa Ahmad a major hadith collector compiled by Ahmad ibn Hanbal at 855 CE. Persia was conquered in 633 CE. So the hadith is after the fact. In 855 CE, the Muslim world was ruled by the Abbasid Caliphate after its golden age peak of power. Already unsuccessfully tried to conquer Constantinople. It would eventually conquer Constantinople after 600 years. So, if someone thinks that is sufficient evidence of a miracle, is gullible and doesn't understand epistemology. Also, Mohammed Hijab, you are being accused or in fact convicted of misrepresenting history and reality.
As for the Prophet Muhammad, his evidence is that he came with a preserved religion. The Quran is preserved in a way that no other ancient book is.
Can you tell me why did he burn the rest of the recitations?
First of all, you can't burn recitations. That doesn't make any sense. You can burn texts, but you can't burn a recitation. That makes no sense. Nonetheless, the companions who had the Quran memorized came together, formed authenticated copies, and anything they did not check or authenticate was burned. This is not a proof against the Quran's authenticity. It's the opposite. It proves the Quran's authenticity because only that which the memorizers of the Quran verified was sent out to the Muslim empire. Everything else was discarded.
The mere fact that 16 to 20 years after Muhammad, Muslims had disagreements in recitations in the Quran, in the text of the Quran, that Umar had to standardize the Quran, even 20 years after Muhammad, disproves the Quranic preservation miracle. So the Quran is not preserved, it was standardized, in other words. Now, one who didn't objected this standardization was, what was his name? Sorry guys, I need to... Abdullah ibn Masud. So this scholar was the one who Muhammad said that if you want to learn the Quran, go to this scholar. And this scholar refused to burn his Quran. He disagreed with the standardized Quran. Moreover, even if the Quran is preserved, that doesn't mean it's true. A falsehood can be preserved.
There's a falsification test within the Quran, challenging humanity to find a contradiction within it.
I personally have pointed out to you, like, over the years, like 30 contradictions. In fact, it won't be an overstatement if I say that the Quran has more contradictions than words at this point. Okay, I overstated now. The Quran is the most contradictory book ever written. And the explanation why is because it was written by many authors and it hasn't got continuing storytelling. And each author don't know what the previous author said. And I gave one example in my previous video. Let me give that example again. Even the challenge that the Quran hasn't got contradictions is a contradiction. Let's see the verses. Do they not reflect upon the Quran, or do they not ponder upon the Quran? If it had been from anyone other than Allah, they would have found within it many contradictions. Okay, so note it says, do they not reflect upon the Quran? And then we go to this verse. Whatever verse we abrogate or cause to be forgotten, we bring a better one or one similar to it. Do you know that the Allah blah blah blah? Okay, so the concept of abrogation in the Quran is exactly because people saw all these endless contradictions and they try to reconcile. But when God says, do you ponder upon the Quran? And when you ponder upon the Quran, you see verses that are abrogated. How you conclude that it hasn't got contradictions? When you admit that there are verses that are contradictory and abrogated.
Challenging humanity to try and produce a chapter like it.
The Quran's inimitability challenge is undefined and subjective. So it's a fake challenge. What does like the Quran mean? It's not defined. And who judges if we meet the challenge? Okay, this is subjective. If the Quran is some linguistic miracle, it's subjective. I think the Quran, if I hear the Quran, my ears hurt. I think it's the most terrible book ever written. So who judges if the Quran is elegant? But I'm Socrates Son, so obviously I will refute this claim, even the fake claim. So, the Quran and the infinite monkey theorem. Premise 1. If we have a monkey with a typewriter typing for infinity, it will eventually type a text like the Quran if a text like the Quran can be written. Premise 2. Something like the Quran can be written by God implies that the Quran can be written, just not by humans or jinn. Premise 3. So a monkey can type something like the Quran, typing randomly for infinity. Premise 4. The probability of a monkey typing the Quran after 1 trillion takes with the probability that the monkey typing the Quran on the first take are equal. You see where I'm going. Conclusion 1. It is possible for a monkey to type the Quran with the first take. Therefore, the inimitability challenge is met. Thank you very much. You know what I did just now? I met the Quranic challenge. I disproven Islam, in other words. So God said, this challenge cannot be met. I, Socrates Son, the Greek hero, Hercules. I am Hercules. Hercules said, or like, what was the Jason? Jason was the smart guy that always found ways. Jason from, yes, let me go on with this delusion. So Jason stood firm in front of God and used logic and defeated his challenge. Thank you very much.
It is amazing. I think it was very well done, very well said. And then on top of that, speaking about the fact and pointing out the necessity that there must be a creator or something that caused the universe if the universe began to exist, and then concluding with the fact that atheism brings nothing to the table, I think is just the cherry on top. And I'm interested in seeing how Destiny responds to this. He is for this, but let's continue and see. We'll give him a chance.
So whether that is the way that you conduct yourself and how you do comedy or speech, whether that's the way that you set up your particular neighborhoods, whether that's the types of laws that you pass to allow freedoms for other people in society, especially people that have traditionally been oppressed by systems of governance, could be different types of minority figures, it could be women.
Well, Muslims are oppressed in different countries. Look at Israel, which he's defending all the time. Muslims are oppressed there. Palestinians are oppressed there. They're a secular country, the only liberal democracy in the Middle East. Also, I forgot to mention, he's just presupposing liberalism. He's just presupposing secular liberalism is better. And he quite literally started this entire speech off, or his entire introduction off, by saying, I think it's better because it follows the principles that I believe in, and the principles that he believes in are secular liberalism. So he said, I believe secular liberalism is better because I believe in secular liberalism. That's quite literally what he did to it. But that was not good. Lastly, he mentioned that people are immigrating to secular societies and out of religious societies, I guess, which is very interesting because the primary people, the number one group from the refugees are Muslims, and they leave, right? They seek refuge in other countries because of Western imperialism, because secular countries bomb and create political vacuums in Muslim majority countries.
It's logically obvious and predictable why Islamic societies fail. One reason is what you demonstrated just now, Islamic supremacy. The idea that Islam is perfect doesn't allow room for self-reflection and corrective behavior. You always blame others for your failures. Secondly, it's hard to make a flourishing modern society based on the social norms of 7th century nomads who didn't know anything about societies. They were in a camel in a desert, haven't seen a city in their life, and you take their social norms in New York, for example, and you expect to make a modern, a flourishing society. Another one is that you disable half of the human capital, women. But don't believe me, here is what your intellectual hero says about that.
You can't get modern technology, as we see in the West, without also getting modern society. Something like feminism. In order to generate enough, in order to have enough factory workers, and in order to have enough engineers and scientists and doctors, you can't exclude 50% of the population. You need to have women in that workforce. You need to have women to do the kinds of things that are necessary to free up the kind of innovation that will drive technology forward. So you need female education. If you have female education, women have to delay getting married. They delay getting married, so they have fewer children. They are more independent. They are more equal to their husbands. That destabilizes families. That produces this kind of independent woman phenomenon that we're suffering from today throughout not just Muslims, but throughout the world. But we cannot catch up if we are just leaving our women at home. We cannot catch up if we're sending our children to the madrasa to learn Quran. We cannot catch up if half of the education, or not half, but 100% of the education, or 90% of the education is about Quran and Hadith and fiqh. This is a waste of time. We have to send our sons and our daughters to learn science, learn mathematics, learn how to use electronics, use the computer, on and on and on. And they were right, in a sense. They were right that you could not achieve industrialization. You couldn't have the Muslim world have, this electric grid and, water treatment plants and you couldn't develop that within your country if you didn't create this educational system, this secular educational system. But what is the effect of that secular educational system? You secularize society. You take people away from Islam. And that's...
Look at what they did to Afghanistan. Look at what they did to Iraq. Look what they did to Syria. Look what they did to Libya. Do I even need to speak about Palestine? Which, by the way, free Palestine. As you guys can see, I'm wearing my Israeli occupied territory hoodie. And you guys get the message.
You pathetic imbecile. What is happening now in Palestine? Who brought that? Your mental disease attacked on 7/10. What happened in Afghanistan? Who brought that? Your mental disease attacked New York in 9/11. In Syria, who is to blame for that? Your mental disease created ISIS and brought this war. Okay. God damn it. God damn it. My friend, I mean, it's one thing to believe this type of nonsense. I mean, it's one thing to attack in 710 Israel, and after 2 years to believe that you are not in fault, but to have this type of confidence that you are on your white horse and say, "Ah, you see how bad you are." What? 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 You blame us for Palestine. And not only that, you are so confident that doesn't even come into passing from your mind that someone else might be at fault. Are you serious, my friend? Yes, the world like to apologize to Islam for the war happened after 710.
So if you also want to rep this amazing hoodie, you can get it from Desert Apparels, and you can find the link down below. And if you guys want 10% off, then use the code Rami10. And Desert Apparels is a supporter of the channel, so by grabbing a hoodie from them, you'll also be supporting me. So the reason people immigrate to secular countries is not because they're better, it's because these secular countries bombed their homeland and then allow for immigration. So they think, well, at least I'm not going to be bombed there. They're not going to bomb themselves to kill me, so might as well go. I know that my family came to Canada and left Palestine because of what the Zionists were doing.
Guys, I have been to Canada 3 times because I have relatives there. This country makes Sweden look like, I don't know, Sudan. I mean, it's the perfect country. Canada is like the perfect country. It's like you are in a movie. It's like it's not real. Every house you see is like you see the old American movies, the perfect houses with the pools and the guy throwing the newspaper and everybody. Is like this type of society. And this fool that was so lucky, his parents took him from an Islamic country and took him to Canada. He says the only difference of Canada with places like, I don't know, Afghanistan is like they bomb them, that they cannot bomb themselves. That's why there's no difference. And it's all imperialism. Right. My friend, on paper, if you do what Sharia says, on paper, the prediction will be Afghanistan. You don't even have to go there. On paper, if an alien comes, okay, from Andromeda galaxy, comes to Earth, and I, on paper, describe him, make a society with these things, how it will look like. The alien will tell you it will look like Afghanistan. Always conflict, always no freedom, there will be no markets, no music, no no. Obviously, my friend. So why we need to wonder? Why we need to wonder? And compare Canada with... okay.
And they were only allowed to do that because Western imperialism. And then he mentioned philosophical progression and technological advancements, basically saying that our societies have produced great technology, civil discussion and philosophical discussion and discovery and all that stuff. Have you not heard of the golden age of Islam, which is a term, by the way, the West uses? Muslims didn't call it that.
The golden era of Islam was when the Muslim world was diverse and liberal, with the translation movement, where Muslims preserved and advanced. That's really important. I'm not claiming that Muslims copied the Greeks. Preserved the Greek type of thinking and advanced this type of thinking. And the Mutazilites, or the rationalists, all of which you would now consider heretics. Then Ibn Hanbal came, introduced the traditionalist thinking that you espouse now, and ended the Islamic Golden Era.
During a time, initially, basically, right after the Islamic Empire started to establish itself, moment it started conquering, is when Muslims started translating Greek text in science. Sure. Now, this is significant because you're thinking, well, what does that have to do with anything? How does that have to do with the Golden Age? How is that showcasing scientific thinking? Well, the fact that the Muslims already knew that there was value in these books indicates a scientific mindset was already present. So
most intellectuals submitted to the official Mu'tazila creed. However, a scholar named Ibn Hanbal from Baghdad refused to recognize the rationalist doctrine. He argued that the Quran was eternal and that it was not open for interpretation or innovation. Hence, the scholar and his followers rejected free will, metaphysics, rationalism, and subscribed to the literal interpretation of the Quran. Ibn Hanbal's theological view could not be more different than the Mu'tazilite scholars, who argued that the anthropomorphic verses in the Quran, which mention the hands, eyes, and face of God, indicate that the holy book should not be interpreted literally. Building on that, the Mu'tazilites stressed that the Quran was open to rational interpretation and innovation. In any case, for his defiance, Ibn Hanbal was imprisoned, tortured, and even banished from Baghdad. For over a decade, the Abbasid rulers tried to break the scholar, but in their pursuit, the caliphs had inadvertently made Ibn Hanbal a folk hero.
Okay, and that was the end of the Islamic Golden Era. So what you espouse now, traditionalist Islam, ended the Islamic Golden Era. Okay, so first you had the rationalists, inspired by the Greece advancing sciences, philosophy, all this kind of stuff, having a kind of liberal mind. These people of the Islamic Golden Era are closer to Richard Dawkins than to Mohammed Hijab, just to grasp. Then your types took power with Ibn Hanbal and ended the Islamic Golden Era.
Over time, the Inquisition became unpopular with the people, and in some cases, riots erupted in the streets of Baghdad in support of Ibn Hanbal. Ibn Hanbal's defiance reduced the credibility of the Mu'tazila. As such, in the following decades, a backlash against Mu'tazilism spread across the Abbasid realm. And third, the end of the Inquisition facilitated the formation of more orthodox theological movements, many of which are still active. As for the school of Ibn Hanbal, in the 18th century it experienced a reformation in the Wahhabi Salafi movement, and therefore its influence is limited but predominant in Saudi Arabia.
Look now the outrageous thing you are doing. You have some people that you prosecuted that made the Islamic Golden Era. Your people ended the Islamic Golden Era. And yet now you try to take the credit of the Islamic Golden Era. So let's see the people you prosecuted.
One of the most comprehensive thinkers was Al-Farabi, who made enormous contributions to physics, chemistry, mathematics, and psychology. He also excelled in philosophy, ethics, and music. For his wide range of accomplishments, Al-Farabi is known as the second master after Aristotle. Another brilliant mind was Al-Haytham, who wrote extensively about astronomy, mathematics, optics, and visual perception. He established the modern scientific method and thereby became the first legitimate scientist in history. The Golden Age also saw advances in medicine thanks to Ibn Sina, whose work remained in use for the following 6 centuries. Yet many of the great minds of the Islamic Golden Age were also fierce critics of the literal interpretation of the Quran. For instance, El-Biruni, who calculated that the earth revolved around the sun and rotated on its axis, challenged the literal creed of Ibn Hanbal by insisting that it was essential to question everything from religion to philosophy. The irrational position was shared by Al-Razi, who was a scholar of Da Vinci's magnitude and once argued that Islam without reason had no value. Then there was Khayyam, one of the most influential thinkers of the Middle Ages. He was a fierce patron of humanism and expressed secular ideas in opposition to the design of Sharia law. Another leading scholar was Ibn Rushd, who advocated for the emancipation of women and stressed that matters of belief should be decided only on the basis of reason and evidence.
Did you want me to go through all the factors as to why that's problematic, or?
I wanted you to just briefly go over each one of them, but just as you just finished off this part here, one of the contentions which Hood Boy makes, said his name, and others have made, is that even if we look at the main figures, right, if they were Mu'tazilites, they were definitely heretics. So if anybody did anything good, or there was a major figure within the Islamic Golden Age, they were most likely some sort of heretic.
The West started calling it that. And it's because Islam basically brought about great thinkers, philosophers, scientists, innovators who would create and innovate different fields, different technologies, and would greatly advance different fields like philosophy, mathematics, economics, sociology, history, it became a codified study because of the Muslims.
My friend, Muslims are just people, like Greeks, like British, like they're just people. Okay. What changes in people? It's not the DNA. Muslims are like every other person. It's the type of software you have in your mind. If you have the Islamic traditionalist software, there is no way you can advance because you proudly stay at the 7th century. How can you advance? How you can have everything? How can you eat your cake and keep it too? You want to be superstitious. You want to read one book. You want to Islam is perfect, nothing will change. You want to demonize all science if it doesn't fit with Islamic superstition. And then you want to also advance in science. How can this happen? You want to have blind faith. How can this happen, my friend? So obviously, my friend, I didn't even have to show you all these things. Obviously, the traditionalist type of thinking you espouse right now on Mohammed Hijab is detrimental to development in science. Obviously.
Because of Ibn Khaldun, and these great thinkers existed in the golden age of Islam as Muslims under Islamic empire. So if you want to use progressiveness as an argument for which system works, well, Islam has it, and you can also argue by the...
Destiny mentions that secularism is superior to religion. But secularism couldn't exist without it, because secularism is by definition a separation between church and state. So how can you have secularism without the church?
This is the stupidest argument not I have ever heard. I have heard at least today, because with you guys, secularism, what he means is a society with a secular system is superior than a society with a theocratic dictatorship. This is what he meant.
You would just have something else. So it can't be superior to it because it incorporates it into its worldview. But the question really is, what's the objective basis for all of his claims? He mentioned LGBT and minority, this, that, and the other. The question is, as an atheist who believes that we are essentially atoms whizzing around, this is the physicalist, this is the materialist assumption. How can you get from that to objective morality in the first place? How can you ascertain that liberalism is the superior ideology from first principles, from a scientific or mathematical perspective. You can't do that. It's not possible because Kant couldn't do that, because J.S. Mill couldn't do that, because greater people than me and you couldn't do that. Therefore, you won't be able to do that.
These people couldn't do that. I am Socrates' son. Okay, so I can do that. Okay, so first thing is that we can very easily demonstrate instrumentally how secularism brings better societies. Okay, so what he's implying is the ought question. Why we ought to be moral. Okay, so we can define for... So, first of all, let me define secular morality. Secular morality is reducing unnecessary suffering and promoting well-being in this world. This is our definition. You have another definition. Okay, so you believe in command theory, in divine command theory. Okay, as your moral, as your definition of morality or your moral theory. Okay, so we have two definitions, the secular one and your one. How we investigate which of those two is the true one? Okay, what is truth? What is a fact or truth? Is what correlates to reality. Okay, so we take the definitions and apply them in the real world and see whether this definition fit in the real world. If you do that, the secular definition works, your definition fails. Let me give you a fast example. Let's say God came to earth and said that abusing children for the fun of it is moral. Does that make it moral? No, even if God said it. So your definition of morality fails in this real example. When we compare it to reality, your definition of morality fails. Now, let's take with the same example, let's test the secular definition. What if by abusing children for the fun of it, somehow, for some weird reason, we reduce unnecessary suffering and promoted well-being for these children and everyone else around? Is that moral? Yes, that is in fact moral. So, we took your definition with a real example and it failed. We took the secular definition with the same example and it passes. So, this is how we investigate which definition of morality is true. Okay, now that we know, but the difficult in fact question, Hijab, the one that you kind of implied, is why we need to care about well-being and morality. The ought question, why we ought to be moral, not how we are moral. How we are moral is easy to investigate, but why we ought to be moral. And the answer to that is because once we evolve consciousness, okay, the immaterial stuff or the metaphysical stuff become part of reality, is part of reality, is part of the universe, without the need of them being supernatural. So, consciousness and the Platonic truths, the metaphysical philosophy, is a manifestation of this universe. It's not supernatural. Okay, so even if we assume that we evolve consciousness, we still have the Platonic truths. Now that we have consciousness and we have the metaphysics, we still have the Platonic truths, and we can establish the ought question from the Platonic truths. Okay, which fundamentally are related with, again, the natural reality. They mirror natural realities. Even the Platonic stuff, my friend, mirror natural realities. Okay, they reflect the rationally deductible universe. They reflect the order of our mind. Okay, all that are now real, therefore objective, can be objective. What you cannot do with secular morality is establish an absolute morality. But you don't need an absolute morality. Okay. For absolute morality, you need an absolute consciousness. If you don't have an absolute consciousness implying God, that means that you don't have absolute morality. You still have objective morality relating to the human condition in this world and the human consciousness that mirrors Platonic truths. Plato doesn't need God. Okay, so I solve what you said no one can solve. Anything else maybe? Guys, I think now that is there anyone that doubts that if I continue this video, every word he will say will be the same as what happened till now? No. No one, even Muslims don't doubt that at this point. So, I won't even bother, because I'm bored, to tell you the truth, to continue this video. Instead, and yes, to whoever hasn't realized that yet, all my channel is a facade for my true intentions, which is promote my music. So I learned philosophy for the single reason to make videos and promote my music. This is what is going on. So this song is called Ακρογιαλιά, which means my beats. My beats. In my beat. In my... Anyway, okay, it's... so, and it goes like this.
Έχω από παιδί μια ακρογιαλιά στο νου μου εγώ και ο χρόνος δεν μπορεί να μου την πάρει από το μυαλό. Έχω στη ψυχή το όνομα της το φτωχό που συλλαβίζουν πέλαργοι ελεύθεροι στον αιγιαλό. Στη δική μου ακρογιαλιά χωρούν και λιμάνια, χωρούν και παιδιά. Στη δική μου ακρογιαλιά η άμμος αισθαίνει την κάθε καρδιά. Στη δική μου ακρογιαλιά νερό και αέρα σημώνουν λαλιά. Στη δική μου ακρογιαλιά το κύμα χαρίζει βλαστούς και κλαδιά. Ο τοίχος σου είναι ψηλός, τον έχτιζες από καιρό. Σ' ακούω τώρα που πονάς, πάρε δυο λέξεις που κρατώ. Πιστεύει μνήμη στη γροθιά πριν νιώσει σκέψη τα παλιά. Καρφώνει σάμος τα μαλλιά, μας σβήνουν όλα στη φωτιά. Στη δική μου ακρογιαλιά χωρούν και λιμάνια, χωρούν και παιδιά. Στη δική μου ακρογιαλιά η άμμος αισθαίνει την κάθε καρδιά. Στη δική μου ακρογιαλιά νερό και αέρα ζυμώνουν λαλιά. Στη δική μου ακρογιαλιά το κύμα χαρίζει βλαστούς και κλαδιά. Στα δικά μου ελληνικά δεν πουλιούνται πατρίδες, δεν πουλιούνται νησιά.
Thank you.